For Creamer Media's Polity, Mtabi Madiba, social activist Ndileka Mandela joins me to discuss her book titled I Am Ndileka Mandela, More Than My Surname. Welcome, Ndileka.
Thank you.
Can you briefly tell us who is Ndileka Mandela and why did you decide to write a book about your life?
Ndileka Mandela is the first of the first of the first, as it says in the book, the first grandchild of Nelson Mandela from his first wife, Evelyn Mandela, ne Mase, of his first son, from his first son, Thembekile Madiba Mandela. And I decided to write the story, my story, because I feel that my grandfather's life is seen, there exists but one narrative, and there's pockets that are missing in his life. And through this literary work, I plan to fill in those missing gaps, because he is an icon to many people. He's never a grandfather, he's never a father, he's never an uncle, he's never a brother. So I wanted to paint a holistic picture of who Nelson Mandela is, beyond being a politician and an icon.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us more on how growing up with your two grandmothers, Evelyn Mandela and Lilian Teyagers, who you called Oma, both had strong personalities, had a direct bearing on your relationship with men. Can you tell us about that?
Well, you know, children learn by emulation, and it's now that I'm a parent myself that I've come to realize that more and more. You know, if you look at children that are raised by strong female role models, it has a direct bearing on how they relate to men, because in my upbringing there was no reference to a man. I believed women have got to be strong on their own and they don't necessarily need a man. And it is only in retrospect that I wished I could have lived my life differently, because when I look at my children and at myself, I have the vantage point of one parent, that of a single female strong role model. There is no balancing factor to that effect. And I believe that children that grow up in that environment have a very narrow view of life. And that has a direct bearing to how they relate to men, because it was only evident when I started with my therapy that I viewed men as being absent all my life. My father died when I was 4. I viewed that men will leave at a certain point. I was never brought up to believe that, you know, you could have a man and have a balanced life. Children that are brought up by single parents do not have a balanced view of life. They have only this one view. And it narrows, as it did with me, it narrows your perspective of men. It also has a direct bearing on how you relate to men, which in my case it has. The relationships that I've had in the past have been, for a lack of a better word, a dead-end relationship. And I would pursue dead-end relationship because I did not have to be emotionally involved, because I knew that in any event it's going to fizzle away. So I self-sabotage before the relationship even starts.
And can you tell us how it felt meeting your grandfather, Nelson Mandela, for the first time when you were 16?
You know, at the time it was exciting, you know, meeting him for the first time and having a relationship with him. It is only in my later years that I realized how abnormal that situation was. To meet your grandfather for the first time and not even touch them, and touch a window, to go to Robben Island and not have anyone prepare you for what you were to be confronted with. It's so surreal that children of struggle icons normalize abnormal situations, because to the people that preceded me, my aunt, my uncle, that life had become normal to the extent that they did not think it was necessary for them to pre-warn me that when you go there, this is what you're going to be confronted with. I thought that I was going to meet him. and only to be confronted with touching a window, with kissing a window. So, but I had to be okay. It's only in retrospect that I see how abnormal that was. You know, I look at my grandchild right now. For Nabila to be able to see me and touch a window would be so foreign. Yet it was normal.
Mm-hmm. And what did your grandfather Nelson Mandela say when you dropped out from Medusa without telling him?
Well, we butted heads to the point that we stopped talking, because he could not understand why I had to drop out of varsity. I had my reasons. I had been working prior that. I had been earning my own salary. And because my bursary was not a full bursary, it was a partial bursary, I had to rely on pocket money, you know, from my mom, and I relied heavily on him. And that is the illusion I talk about in the book, that I thought that our relationship would be an extension of what it was when I was in prison, because I could ask him for anything and he could provide for it. And when he was out, suddenly he couldn't. He had to refer me to people, and oftentimes those promises were not forthcoming. And to the point that I said, well, I have a profession. I can't stomach this. I've been self-sufficient. I cannot be relegated to childhood status, so I'm going to drop out. And I didn't tell him.
You also mentioned that you were once homeless, as in not having a home to call your own. Can you explain to us what it was like being evicted from one place to another?
You know, when you get to that point, you just live in the moment. And my primary concern was to have my children have a decent roof over their head. And you know, it was only when I established now a permanent address that I started to see, my goodness, that was so surreal. But it also destabilized my children, you know, and they would be worried, and in between that I had to travel. And they would be worried, you know, that we now have to move from this apartment. They were decent apartments, furnished apartments, very nice ones. But this fact of that, you know, you could, because these are timeshare, so you have to book them for a week, and then you have to go to another one, which means you're practically living in a suitcase. And it's very destabilizing, even for me, you know. But the one thing that I was happy about is that we were not in the streets. And we had a roof over our head, decent roof. And I told my children, I said, look, I've never let you down as my children. We've been through things, and I'm telling you, this is temporary. It's about 3 months. We'll be settled. And, you know, as God is my witness, and because God is amazing and is great, in 3 months' time, we're able to, because that happened from August, September, October, November, 3.5 months, December, we had a permanent address.
Mm-hmm. And during the hashtag #MeToo campaign, you spoke out about being raped. Can you briefly explain to us what led to you to tell your story, and how did you feel when other people didn't believe you?
Fortunately for me, it was not a question of not being believed, you know. There were a few sporadic men that would say that, and for me, I would expect that from men anyhow, because it's their thing, you know. We are their possessions. They can take us whenever they want to. But what made me come out was a conversation I was having with a friend of mine via WhatsApp, where we were talking about alluding to the fact of Denny Odan with the alleged rape in 2010. It was his response to my comment when he said to me, what was the woman expecting inviting a man into a room? I said, well, you do understand that if a woman says no, no means no. And a husband can rape a wife, because the very definition of rape is if you continue when a woman says no. He then says to me, well, it means that as men will have to carry a consent form so that you guys cannot come and say we've been raped. Oh, I lost it completely. I said, it is because of men like you that we get raped and we do not talk about it. It's because of those attitudes. Because my ex-boyfriend told me straight up, you can go to the police in Sandton, nobody's going to believe you. It's not that I believed him. For me, it was more putting my children through that trauma that I did not come out. And my coming out was not even because people are saying that you must name and shame. I said, it was not about that. Because coming out is cathartic. Coming out means that because as long as it exists in your head, it does not exist in my view. It's only in your head. I had to come out, and I was amazed by the number of women that came out on my page on that during that time to say that, you know what, it had happened to me, and I was so scared to talk about it. And more importantly is the fact that rape is a very violent crime, and it affects women or people that have been raped at their most vulnerable when you are naked. And when you are naked, that's why, you know, people use torture when they keep you naked, because they know that you are at your most vulnerable. And for it to be done by a person that you trust and love, it's a violation of the worst order. It doesn't matter when you come out. People would say, you know, in recent times, why did they keep quiet for so long? It's a personal thing. Some people come out immediately, some people come out after a long time. It's a personal journey. Until you've been raped, you have no reason to be doubting people that have been raped and say that, yes, I admit there are women that use rape as a weapon and lie about it. But if you look at it, it's a very small percentage. And to deny that it exists would be not being genuine and not being authentic.
So do you think the South African justice system is doing enough for gender-based violence activists?
No, they're not. If you look at the sentence that Leanda Botha has gotten, for instance, if Leanda Botha has gotten they say it's 3 life sentence, but they are running concurrently, not consecutively, which would mean if they were running consecutively, he would have been jailed for the rest of his life. The fact that he proves by his testimony, he proves premeditation, that should have gotten him, if there was capital punishment, which is hanging. But we don't have. He should have gotten life without parole. The fact that in 25 years he's be eligible for a parole is a travesty to justice. It's a travesty to anyone that has been raped. So the justice system is not doing nearly enough in terms of gender-based violence. As we speak now, right now, there is a woman that's being raped or beaten or killed by their partner.
And your father, Tembekile Mandela, died when you were just 4 years old, leaving you to grow up without a male figure in your life. What are some of the things that you think could have turned out differently if your father was in your life?
Most of it was my relationship with men. I would have been perhaps in a lasting relationship. I would have been married or have a life partner. That's marriage. Sometimes it's just too restrictive for me. It's just I'm a free-spirited person. I just believe that even if I were to marry, I was telling my partner recently, I said, you know what, even if you have to marry, you need to have your own home and my own home, because I want my space. And I know society would say that that's not a marriage. It is a marriage according to me, because I believe that relationships should be defined by the very people that are in a relationship. So it would have changed my relationship with men, definitely. It would have changed even my trajectory of life. I know Dad was an ultimate provider. So I would have been spoiled for once. I don't know if that's the route that I would love myself to be, but definitely it would have, the one thing it would have changed is my relationship with men, because if every girl, you know, is their first love is their father, because that's the first male they can identify with. So my father dying at such an age when I was 4 years old, it robbed me of a relationship with my father and a relationship with a man.
And lastly, you have grown to be a strong single mom to your 2 children. What lesson do you teach your children, especially your son? Because you are his mom and his dad at the same time.
Well, for me, it's how to treat women with dignity. I had this huge argument the one time when he had done something that was, you know, disrespectful to women. I told him, if you wanna get out of my house, you will pack your stuff and leave my house, because I will not tolerate it. because what you've done is tantamount to women abuse. You may not see it as that right now. I will not tolerate my son being abusive to women of whatever background they come from. So those are the lessons that I impart to him, and the lessons that of gender parity. I remember when he came out of initiation school, they taught, I'm a man. So in my house, there's chores, irrespective of gender. So I love cooking. It's one of the things I relax. It's cathartic to me. So after cooking and eating, we wash dishes. I either wash, but I prefer washing because I'm a control freak when it comes to that. I can wipe the surfaces nicely and start it going. So one of them would either wipe or the other one would pack dishes. So when he came back from the mountain, he says, no, I'm a man. Pumla came running to me. Mom, I said, in whose house? In my house? You're a man? I don't think so. There's chores every day. You need to do your chores. You'll be a man in your house, not in my house. So I teach him about how to treat women, with dignity, how to also play his role as a man, and about the fact that there are gender roles. The woman I am today is a different woman I was in my 30s. I thought that I could do it all without a man, but I can't. The fact that we are physically built differently is tantamount to me to the fact that we have different roles to play, and he as a man needs to play his roles. Our roles as women are to nurture and to build homes, but that doesn't mean that we're less than men. And the role of men is to provide and protect, which it doesn't mean that they're superior to women. We are just counterparts. We stand side by side. So those are the lessons that I impart to him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Ndileka Mandela speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about her book titled I Am Ndileka Mandela, More Than My Surname.